Hi everyone, and welcome to the first part of this video tutorial series on how to edit audiobooks for Deyan Audio Services. We're going to start off with some basic duties of the editor, which we're going to go in greater detail into later. We're going to talk about why we're using Pro Tools and talk about the other tools that we need to get started. All right, let's dive in. So first of all, editing, in our workflow at least, takes place after recording, but before QC and mastering. Now, during recording, a lot of effects are being printed, de-essing, expansion, EQ, compression, and we're going to run pretty conservative but healthy paths of isotope RX mouth to click. Never regular to click, but mouth to click. It's really safe to use in moderate amounts, does not really create artifacts or risk them the way regular to click would, because it just goes right for those mouth noises and kind of nothing else. So I've talked to a lot of editors who in their workflow are used to getting very raw audio that they have to do a bunch of bulk processing on in order to get started. In our workflow, we try to do that ahead of time, and you'll see why in a sec. So once you've got the audio as the editor, what you're doing is cleaning up unacceptable noises. The threshold for this might not be as strict as film or television, but we're trying to get rid of anything that would take the listener out of the experience for sure. Adjusting timing when needed. Each narrator will have their own tempo. You're not trying to re-edit their tempo entirely, but just try to find that tempo. And when you find a pause that seems of an unintentional length, you want to help them out and fix it and make it sound like what you think they would want to have performed it like in the first place. You know, we want to ensure all paragraphs are perfectly clean and well timed, right? Pauses at commas and periods are better, but breaths between paragraphs really aren't great, especially if it's between narration and dialogue or between the dialogue of two characters, because then there's confusion as to who's breathing this breath, you know? We want to note any misreads, mispronunciations, or unfixable problems we notice. Of course, the editor's listening faster than the QCer, so they're probably not going to find as many misreads as the QCer is, but the editor should be able to pick out any systemic mispronunciations that occur. We provide a word list as to how all the words should be pronounced. So, for example, if a character name comes up a few hundred times and it's being mispronounced, hopefully that's not the case, but in that case, we would definitely expect the editor to notice it sometime during those hundreds of mispronunciations. You know, that's not a common case, but we want the editor to be on top of that as much as possible. And the editor is working while it's being recorded. So if you can catch mispronunciations, you can actually report them to production and they can stop doing what they're doing. And we can save ourselves a lot of work. And also, just if you're trying to, you know, fix something with editing and it just won't fix, but it really is unacceptable to leave in a product, then we'd note that for pickup, of course. We want to adjust the top and tail timings of each chapter to the client request. Each client has their own specs as to how much room tone should start a chapter, how much it should end with, and how much spacing there should be after the chapter announcement either. So you want to know what client you're working for and what their specs are to even get started, really. We're going to clip group and name each chapter. We name them according to our particular specs. And then when you're done, you're going to deliver a Pro Tools PTX, an annotated script with all of your notes on it, and any new audio files you generate to the QC or proofer. And we're going to try to generate as few new audio files as possible. And we're going to go into that. It's why we're all using Pro Tools together. See, the thing is, by our deadlines, we're trying to get work done as fast as possible. And to do this, we want to transfer as little data as possible between engineers. So we're avoiding things, we try to avoid things like sending an entire batch of audio files that are just, you know, the entire book, or sending an entire Pro Tools or other DAW session, that these would be very large uploads. Using the same DAW allows us to have to transfer very little data. If both engineers are using Pro Tools, then what happens is, as the program is being recorded, it's being uploaded to an FTP. Both the editor and the QC are downloading these files. The QCer's session will eventually contain these files, so that's why they're downloading them early. The editor works on these files, doesn't do any bulk processing, tries to do as little processing as they can, maybe high pass or hard P, something like that. There are reasons, but you're not going to processing as your number one fix. As the editor is trying to fix most things with simple deletion, simply clearing the noise or problem out of the timeline in shuffle mode. And so if you really do need to process something to fix a problem, that audio file is going to need to be included in your upload as the editor, so the QCer can download and open your session. The QCer is otherwise only downloading the files the director is uploading. If you generate any new files on your side through processing, the QCer is going to need those files in order to open it up. So that's why you're trying to process as little as possible, why we're not consolidating the chapters. You know, Pro Tools is also still unfortunately, probably the most popular audio editing program that fills all of our professional needs. I say that because a lot of people just gripe about Pro Tools, and the more you work with it, the more aware you are of its issues and whatnot. And I've heard a lot of good things about like Adobe Audition. Some people like Reaper or Audacity, and they have their own reasons, which are fine. But we're trying to use something where we can transfer it between a bunch of people. So we need something that's both popular and very professional. And Pro Tools is unfortunately, for better or worse, probably the only thing that accomplishes this. And as we're going to see, with the help of macros, Pro Tools can be really powerful, and we can get some kind of new extra features that people are only used to in other DAWs, like keeping multiple things in your clipboard, something Pro Tools doesn't support by nature, right? So that's why we're using Pro Tools to edit and to QC, and that's why we're all using Pro Tools together. So at least we're all in the same boat, right? So let's talk about the tools we're going to need to get started. Of course, I've said it enough times at this point. You've caught on, I'm sure. Avid Pro Tools. I've got 2018 here, but you can go back all the way to version 8. We don't use really any new features, and I've been editing like this since version 8. So it's totally possible. If you have an older machine with an older version of Pro Tools, that could actually run snappier. The newer versions of Pro Tools have much beefier requirements. It's hard to get them to run as responsively with a similarly, priced computer. So if you got an old computer with an old operating system, feel free to, keep your version of Pro Tools. Don't upgrade on our benefit, Something you probably don't have that we're going to need, though, is Keyboard Maestro. That's the Mac program for what we need. If you're not on a Mac, you're going to need some other macro software, and I haven't really researched it, but I know there's lots of macro software out there. Keyboard Maestro is just kind of our favorite for Macs, and I'll show you that real quick. What this allows us to do is create either simple or even complicated macros and scripts. Just as a quick example, something that Pro Tools doesn't have built in is they don't have a shortcut for preferences. Look at that. How short-sighted, right? So what I do here is I create a hotkey for Control P, and what that does is it goes to Pro Tools and selects preferences. And so then if I go into Pro Tools and hit Control P, I've got preferences. Now we'll get a lot more into this later, but this allows us to unlock some interesting features in Pro Tools, like we can keep multiple things in our clipboard, for example, and that'll be really important and helpful to us going fast later. I suggest a full keyboard and a mouse. The mouse is probably the most important thing here, rather than a trackpad or a trackball. If you're working on a trackpad or trackball, I do not predict you will be able to go as fast as you need to. I've only had one person who successfully did so on a trackball, but they had a pretty savant-like use of the trackball. So even if you're used to a trackball or trackpad, I'm going to say you're probably making it way too hard on yourself by sticking with that instead of using a mouse for what we're going to do. Mice are just very, very quick and efficient at getting to a single place on your screen very accurately without a lot of readjustments, or with a trackball you might be doing a correction or two or something like that. I also suggest a full keyboard. To me, that's like the difference between using an 88 key grand piano and using a little Casio keyboard. The full keyboard's going to be sturdier, it's going to move less on you, you're not going to be afraid to slam down on it hard, which will make you a quicker editor. Also, just in general, a lot of these laptops these days, there's sensitive electronics underneath the keyboard anyway, so the less you can use your laptop keyboard, the best if you're working a laptop. So definitely, I would suggest working with a full keyboard and mouse. Trying to edit like this on a trackpad is just going to be murder. Okay, you only need one monitor for what we're going to do. In fact, I've heard trying to do it on two monitors can be more awkward. So even though I prefer two monitors for a lot of tasks, for audiobook editing, one is fine. If you got two, cool. We're probably going to put all the programs on one monitor anyway, because as you're going to see, the less your eyes and your mouse have to move around the screen, the better. So extra screen real estate is not always a plus in this case. So, and almost most importantly, we need headphones, not monitors. You're just not going to hear as much as you will on headphones, and specifically Sony MDR 7506s. These are the headphones that are industry standard in audiobooks and are pretty standard in a lot of other industries as well. They use them in production, and a lot of people use them in VO, but we know for a fact everyone is using them in audiobooks. So if you want to hear what your other vendors and clients are hearing in audiobooks, you need 7506s. Why are they so important? They're just very, very bright. In fact, they're bright to the point where things might not sound great on them, especially music is going to sound way too bright. And I've had people using these headphones who need to get acclimated to how SE things sound. They'll hear audio and be like, oh man, someone needs to de-S this. When in fact, it's just the fact that you're getting more of those consonant frequencies in the 7506s. So not great headphones to mix on. They're not all purpose, definitely. But for editing, voiceover, editing dialogue, they're just absolutely great. And they're only $80 American if you're in the US. So as far as headphones and audio gear go, they're pretty good. And also on as far as price, Keyboard Maestro, only $36, about 5.5% the price of a perpetual license for Pro Tools. So for something that really helps unlock some stuff from Pro Tools, helps you get work done faster, it's definitely worth the $36 to get Keyboard Maestro. So if you aren't rocking Keyboard Maestro and some Sony MDR 7506s, if you don't have a proper wired mouse, I'd go ahead and get these going before we get started here. All right, so that's about it. In the next video, we're going to take a look at some preferences you're going to need to know and some keyboard shortcuts for Pro Tools you're definitely going to need to know. So let's take a look at that next.